There's one thing I've noticed about all the Golden Crocoduck nominees over the years. They're nearly all men, or of indeterminate sex, and I began to wonder, is the proud public display of ignorance somehow just a male thing? Are women a bit more modest about displaying their private foibles in public? Or are they so much smarter than men? The realization was prompted by the fact that we have one lone female nominee for this year's Golden Crocoduck, who goes by the YouTube name of Aminakin. Before I tear into her, I'll say this for Aminakin: even if she doesn't understand evolution, at least she's tackling a serious science subject instead of projecting the stereotypical image of women as obsessed with hair and makeup. So here is her thoughtful opinion of Charles Darwin.
The Elemis Pro Radiance Cream Cleanser. I've used this before because my sister used it, and it was just way...
Inside this kit you get 3 pieces of skincare.
Skincare?
QVC and said that instead of using your cleanser in the morning, it's a very simple, basic, everyday eyeliner.
God damn it, will you stop talking about skincare, eye cream and cleanser and give us your opinion on Charles bloody Darwin?
Basically, his theories had something to do with this idea that man became more and more intelligent, and as man did so, as man evolved, man became whiter and whiter.
That's basically Darwin's theory. Where do I start? Well, let's start with the fact that Darwin's theory, as you call it, is not a theory, but a principle called natural selection. And the principle of natural selection says nothing about people becoming whiter as they get more intelligent. It shows how genetic traits that favour survival get passed on to successive generations. I have no idea whether Darwin thought people got whiter as they got more intelligent, and it really doesn't matter. All sorts of silly ideas were believed in the 19th century, including the idea that the superiority of the white races proved creation, and that inferior races had become savages because of their fall from the Garden of Eden. Whatever people thought 150 years ago, whether they were arguing for or against creation, makes no difference to our current scientific knowledge. But in case Darwin ever did think that intelligence makes you whiter, I'm happy to say that the principle of natural selection and 100 years of research shows that he was wrong. In fact, natural selection suggests that our ancestors must have got blacker as they became more intelligent, because when they emerged from the trees and began hunting on the savannah, they lost their protective covering of fur. As a result, more melanin was produced in the skin to shield it from the sun's ultraviolet rays. But the loss of fur and the gain in intelligence were not genetically linked. They simply evolved together through natural selection. Similarly, as humans migrated out of Africa to more extreme latitudes, they lost melanin because they had less need for protection from ultraviolet radiation, and the paler skin allowed them to absorb what limited ultraviolet radiation they were exposed to in order to synthesize vitamin D. How is it Aminakin failed so miserably to understand natural selection, or the fact that it shows no link between skin colour and intelligence? It all started, of course, with the obligation to follow religious doctrine.
We're not supposed to believe in evolution. We're not supposed to believe that this is how it happened. So I really wanted to look into it and see what Islam had to say about all this. And I happened to come across this book randomly one day, and I was completely hooked as soon as I began to read it. At the front it says, The Scientific Collapse of Darwinism and its Ideological Background.
You know, if you want to find out what Darwin's basic idea was, why not read the paper he co-wrote, or the book he wrote? Better yet, get up to date, because there's been well over a century of research since Darwin published The Origin of Species. Let me explain. If I wanted to read and understand, say, the history of Islam, I think you'd be the first to criticize me if the only book I singled out for reading was titled Why Islam is a Load of Nonsense. Wouldn't you suggest I read a history textbook? Or perhaps check what I was reading against other sources to verify that Why Islam is a Load of Nonsense isn't leading me up the garden path.
When I began to read this book really takes it from the start. It actually explains that in order to believe in the theory of evolution, you've not only got to believe that man evolved from ape, but that the very, very first molecule that ever existed came about by chance.
No, you don't have to believe that at all. You just need a fifth grader's understanding of basic chemistry. The first atoms were hydrogen and helium, so it's likely that the first molecules were hydrogen atoms joined together in a covalent bond. If you believe this happened by chance, then we wouldn't be able to repeat that reaction billions of times over in science classrooms, of the kind you fell asleep in. Here's an experiment I used to do with my kids in the garden shed. Take some zinc, add hydrochloric acid, and you'll get a reaction. Each of the hydrogen atoms joins in pairs to make hydrogen gas, and each zinc atom combines with 2 chlorine atoms to make zinc chloride. This isn't pure chance. It's 100% predictable and reliable because it's based on simple chemistry.
Idea that if everything happened by chance, then you really have to extend it right to the beginning of life itself. So you really have to think about it in terms of life being a product of the building blocks, which are protein molecules. And then he sort of breaks it down and he says, okay, protein's made of amino acids. So you really have to think about the idea that when the Earth came about after the Big Bang, there were these amino acids that somehow got formed by chance. The atomic matter just happened to sort of form itself into amino acids.
Amino acids didn't somehow get formed by chance. We know how amino acids form just as we know how hydrogen atoms form. Again, it's chemical bonding. Look, if you don't want to add a book on chemistry to your rather lonely library, let me explain the subject through something you're more familiar with. Cosmetics.
It lasts for ages. Now it's a 10% benzoyl peroxide acne treatment gel. That's what it says on the front.
Great. So you accept that there's a chemical called benzoyl peroxide. What makes one set of chemical reactions a natural part of a daily beauty regime and another set of chemical reactions an impossible chance happening? Of course, you can say that at the beginning of time an invisible being dictated that this is how atoms should interact. Believe what you like, but the fact is that this is how chemicals do interact, in a way that's controlled and predictable and well understood. There are billions of smart women out there, but it's nice to know that a few of them can match creationist men when it comes to complete ignorance of basic science. And just in case anyone thinks I'm being sexist by continually focusing on creationist men, let's redress the balance a bit with potholer's salute to creationist women.
Well, isn't that special? For years, carbon dating was being
I think facts, not theories, should be taught.
Yes, let's stop teaching scientific theories in school. Like heliocentric theory that says the Earth revolves around the Sun, atomic theory, germ theory, plate tectonic theory, and let's not forget the theory of tides.
Tide goes in, tide goes out. Never a miscommunication. You can't explain that.
That's right, Billy. We stop teaching scientific theories in school, and then it's anybody's guess what makes the tides go in and out. And thanks to all the girls for the chance to show that for every Ken, there's a Barbie.
But as far as when it comes to like little theories and whatnot, I probably want to stay away from those. I believe in the truth and the truth only, not somebody's, imagination or hope or whatnot.